Those iced teas look pretty good.
Inviting.
Yes. Could use a nice iced tea right now, actually. I'll give it like 30 more seconds while people start joining in. Can you believe it's August, Rennie?
Yeah, no, I can't believe it. The clock keeps ticking and the calendar keeps moving. So,
All right, I'll get us kicked off. So, yeah, welcome to August edition of the Tariff Tea. I guess we continue, right? Since we're in the middle of summer, we kept it as an iced Tariff Tea. Although after everything that's happened over the past month, there really hasn't been much time to like sit back and enjoy summer. So we have a lot to cover today. As always, for the disclaimer, Val, while you sip on your iced tea, we'll just kind of take a quick pause here. Everything that we're covering today, as always, is meant to inform, it's not advice. This is not legal guidance. And as we always say in trade and tariff environment, things change very quickly. So your specific facts matter, and always validate any decisions with your internal or external advisors. And we can get started. Let's move on in. So let's just, I just wanted to kind of share today. I'm Nunzio Di Filippis. I'm the co-CEO of CargoTrans, licensed customs broker, joined by Rennie. As always, we're going to go through what's brewing this month. We're going to do a strategy spotlight, which you may have guessed it's on the flip, since that's what everyone has been talking about. And then throughout, please, continue to ask questions throughout this entire presentation. So let's go to the headlines, right? So we'll start with the CPSC. The filings went live last month on July 8th, right? And something I wanted to share with everyone, right? What we've seen, just because you get a customs release, that does not equal compliance. And Rennie, this is very similar to any really PGA, right? Like similar to like FDA, you see a customs release, but you still have to kind of comply with the PGA. So I actually kind of want to take a step back here and talk about compliance in general, not specific only to the CPSC. What we're seeing, right? We spoke a little bit about this yesterday, Rennie, is that compliance in general, right? There's mitigation is not the same as it used to be, right? Where if something goes wrong and you have customs or PGAs knocking on your door, in the past, you'd be a little sticker shocked with the penalty of a fine that comes through, and then you end up maybe somewhere at around like a 90% reduction sometimes, especially if it's maybe your first error, right? What are we seeing like today, right? And like how is compliance, penalties, fines, how is that changing in terms of customs position on all this?
well, the customs position is that enforcement escalation is here to generate revenue. So the traditional structure of mitigation, right, where you reference that 90% reduction in penalty amount, we've seen customs say that the latest escalation includes very minimal mitigation, maximum 50%, only if you're in a position such as a trusted trader with CT-PAT, dedicated with those benefits. Only if you have mitigating circumstances like written controls and a defensible compliance program. So mitigation is a lot tougher to get, especially if a violation occurred.
Yep. So kind of moving on, right? We have 25% Section 301 tariffs that we saw specifically targeted with Brazil, excluding all the good stuff, right? The coffee, the beer, OJ, and some other items.
Yeah,
And
things that we need. We need that
right.
coffee. Don't mess with that.
Right. And then, right, looming, right, in the background, we have this Section 301 excess capacity tariffs that might be coming, right? And there's countries like China, EU, Vietnam, India, Mexico that, we're still waiting to see if those come out. The ones that did get published, as we saw, right? 122 left and enters very quickly the flip 301s. So we have like a lot of Section 301 balls in the air, right? We have targeted ones, we have specific to forced labor, and then we have excess capacity. Can you just like explain to everyone like what's the difference between these three? Are there more, that are coming?
Yeah. And understanding the, convolution of the moment, right? Because up till now, whenever there was a reference to a section or a provision like 301, like 232, like 122, right? Like the IEPAs, right? Right? There was always a specific reference to a platform that gave the authority for the issuance of those tariffs. Now, 301 is a broad-based platform. We can't stop at 301 because this is not China 301. It is a platform that they are using the 301 authorization to implement additional tariffs for many different reasons. So you are going to see a variation of 301s from here on out. And I recall, growing up, whenever you would challenge someone on why did you do that? And a very vague response, really an abuse of authorization and power, the response was just because. Right? Right?
Yeah.
Just because I can, right? That's what they meant. And that's exactly where we're at. 301 is a just because. And then there are definitive sub-level, subject matters on what that just because is dealing with. It could be
Yep.
dealing with excess capacity. It could be dealing with a Canadian forest fire. It could be dealing with whatever the sub-level subject matter is. But the strength behind the just because is the authorization to tax.
It's funny you say that actually. So we'll talk a little bit deeper on the flip, but I'm sure as we all saw just yesterday, right? I always say we can't really ever just finalize these presentations because
Yep.
things happen so quickly. But yesterday, 25 states filed suit again, right, against the administration, against the use of flip of the 301, challenging it. And I think their argument was they're doing this just because.
Just because.
Because they're basically the states are basically saying, wait a minute, and Trump and the administration,
Yeah.
IEPA tariffs were just struck down, and this is just replacing the
Correct.
IEPA. I mean, that's their argument, right?
Correct.
So something to watch out for in terms of challenging though. 301s, right? We've seen these stick, right? So I think the people challenging the administration, the government is the states challenging are going to have a lot bigger hill to climb with this one, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
that being said, right, you have now also, right, the mention of the 338 up to Canada could face up to 50% tariffs for allegedly kind of discriminating against some American products, our California wines, our motor vehicles, and we haven't seen this in almost 100 years, right? This is an old statute. What's
Correct.
what is your? I mean, the clock is ticking, so it goes effective August 19th. Does this stick? What's going? What are we seeing in the background on this?
I think it's more than just a negotiation ploy, and more than just a follow up to the discernment of how the USMCA went, right? It is a clear indication that we are in a trade war with Canada, separate from the conversation of USMCA. Right. This is a Canadian US conflict. And as a response to Canada challenging any U.S. government contracts that were in place, right? There is, again, a response, a tit for tat going back and forth. So I expect it to roll out. I don't think that it is just a threat. I think that it'll be implemented along with, again, the carrot that this could increase revenue coming into the United States. And, it's more than a money grab, right? It is, if there are, I don't care if it's a 250-year-old statute, if there's a platform that, this is the view of, those in with the authorization, that we could assess a tariff, then that's the hammer they're using right now. And again, stay tuned.
Yep. Yep. And talking about stay tuned later today, right? There is another hearing in the CIT. And so either we'll hear later today or tomorrow that they're going to let us know about phase three, that they're developing functionality, CBP, to accept those entries that have IEPA attached to it, where you also have a claim opened in the CIT. There are some, we're also hearing that possibly if you've protested, that might be dealt with this phase as well. So we shall see. Rennie, I thought that summer's supposed to be like when things slow down. You hear about the dog days of summer, but this month, obviously, that did not happen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot coming, but let's go take a deeper dive now on the flip, right? 301. So kind of just want to share with everyone of what we're seeing after this went live, right? So just general kind of lay of the land, right? It replaced the 122. There's 60 different countries involved in this Flip 301 action. Most countries are facing either 10% or 12.5% that stack on top of the MFN, except for the EU and Taiwan. There's that's the base of 10% or like a floor of a minimum. So if your MFN is like at a 3.5, bumps you up to 10. Similar for Japan, South Korea, and Switzerland, but at a 12.5%. And this does not apply, it's not stacked onto 232s. So, that's a lot there, and there's limited relief mechanisms. So, Rennie, what should importers understand about this 301 action when it comes to exclusions or drawbacks or potentially petitioning for exclusions under Flip 301? How is it different from the China 301s?
Yeah. So the administration has taken the position on the imposition of the 301, that it will not receive or honor requests for considerations of exclusions, right? It will not allow an annual period of re-review. This is it. What you see is what you get, right? There are, minimal opportunities the way it is written now. And again, I don't want to be a naysayer and say that there will not be amendments to it, that it's impossible but those amendments will be driven by the administration, not by the trade. And yep, there are possible opportunities for drawback, right? There are possible opportunities, again, for adherence to the established exemptions that are offered. However, I would be very careful before claiming one of the harmonized classification exemptions, claiming one of the circumstance exemptions. If we look back over a compliance red flag in the history of importing, one of the carrots out there was any condition that would result in duty-free import kind of gravitated importers. Oh, I want that, right? I want to import
Of
something
course.
under a
Me
TIP
too.
because there's no duty. I want to import something as American goods returned because there's no duty. Again, you've always had to have the responsibility to defend any exemption. It is different now because customs doesn't consider that a misinterpretation, doesn't consider that lack of knowledge. If you claim an exemption for any reason and you don't qualify for that, customs considers that tariff evasion. And that is the equivalence of fraud.
And we got the DOJ attached to this as well right now. And I mean, to your point, right? HTS classifications are definitely under a microscope. We're getting tons of inquiries to kind of, take a look, right? I think we were talking about this yesterday, like, oh,
Yep.
forever we've been classifying, where it ends in 40, but I think it really belongs to 20 because 20 is now, excluded. So I to your point, right? That's what they're targeting, right? That's what customs will be targeting is like, oh, you're claiming that exclusion, and especially if you're making a change in the midst of all this, it's got to be defensible. And we've just saw, right, that customs is getting a really big boost of funds coming in to invest in technology and AI specifically to kind of weed these out, right, and get to these CF-28s and audits a lot quicker than we've ever seen in the past. So yeah, definitely be ready to defend if you're going to look at classification, tariff engineering, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
We're also seeing that many importers are asking us to kind of model duty exposure right before placing POs, right? So purchasing decisions, they're now being driven by kind of landed costs instead of unit costs. So we're seeing a lot more uptick in these sort of requests and activities. And right, finance teams are now getting involved. Like before, it used to be because kind of like maybe just procurement or maybe your trade compliance folks. Now you have really finance, C-suite boards getting involved, and CFOs. Why do you? Why are we seeing that? Like, why do you think that is? Where now you have like so many other decision makers coming to the table here when you're talking about really compliance and tariff exposure.
I think the clear result of the escalation of tariffs exposed lack of connectivity in a lot of importers' establishments, where the reliance on making decisions on, procurement, classification, origin was in certain silos. However, when the tariffs were introduced and the tariffs were limited to a specific country, right, and the financial impact on the company's bottom line, which threatened 25%, 50%, 84%, right, that hit and caused an awareness at the C-suite level to say, wait a minute, this is a financial risk that can turn us upside down. So then became questions like, well, how do we know that that's the country of origin? How do we know that that's the harmonized classification? And let's make sure that that's accurate because of that financial risk. So now you marry the financial risk of tariffs along with this $1 billion collection in fines and penalties over the last year from the DOJ, and a C-suite, CFO, COO, CEO, they are very cognizant of the financial risk facing their organizations, and they have to, again, make decisions, and they can't rely on someone in procurement must know what they're doing, or don't we have a contract language, a term that says the supplier is supposed to provide us with a harmonized number, right? Isn't that enough? And they've learned, no, it's not enough. And you're starting to see conversations directly with customs brokers, right? And customs brokers is saying, wait a minute, the law says you are supposed to classify and provide it to us, right? We can help
Right.
you, but, and not only are we using that number now, you've been using that number for the last 10 years. So changing it, you need a defense, right? Defending that it's there, you need SOPs and a database that has been updated and verified annually. And a lot of companies, again, don't have that at the core of their representation. And it's exposed to, the CFOs who are saying, you mean we don't have that, right?
Right.
And it's been promoted for years that that's what they need, but it's shined the spotlight on the necessity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talk about this all the time, where
Yep,
importers, have just kind of really been like, hey, my custom broker gave me that information, right?
yep,
And
yeah,
I obviously, customs brokers are a great resource. They're going to help, get you to the right place. But that is a dangerous response. I think sometimes when customs is asking questions and you point to my shipper gave it to me, my broker gave it to me, I constantly have to remind importers that customs wants the onus to be on you. You're
yep.
the importer of record. And I know we've
Requires.
been,
Yep.
yeah, and I know we've recently had meetings and challenge where the CEO comes in and kind of defiant, right? Coming in
Yeah,
saying,
yeah,
no, my brokers have always done this. What are you talking about? Right.
right. Absolutely. Aggressively.
And yeah, yeah.
Because
So,
it's true. It really is true. I mean, a 1980s, 90s mentality, the broker did everything, right? But that's what the Mod Act in 1993 was supposed to correct. That's what TIFTIA in 2016 was supposed to correct. It warned the trade that your responsibility as an importer is to classify, value, defend your origin, provide that to the broker, and then review your entries so that even if the broker did make a mistake, or if you agreed, that you have the opportunity to amend and or correct, or remediate those to correct information. But we are at a moment right now where there's a zero tolerance. Customs has said no more warnings, right? We're turning that into a recovery, right? And you want refunds? We are going to again offset those refunds through the collection of additional penalties that is non-refundable.
yeah, and they have a whole executive order that was issued a little over a month ago
Yep,
specifically to
yep,
arm them with
exactly.
just that. So, moving on to the strategy spotlight. So, you know, how importers should adapt now that we're in this Flip 301 era, right? And so, one, recalculate landed cost models, right? As we said, don't treat Flip 301 as another temporary tariff. Yes, it's being challenged, but this 301s are generally much more, let's say, stickier, right, than others in the past. Another strategy is, and that we're suggesting is go back to your suppliers and review your agreements, right? Your contract should clearly define like who is responsible if duties change, whether pricing adjustments are automatic. And really, I think an interesting conversation point to have with suppliers is like, who bears the risk if new tariffs are imposed like after a PO is already issued, right? Now, again, that's a negotiation like anything, but these are conversations, that are worth having. If I'm in charge of supply chain, in charge of purchasing, department for an importer, I want to have those type of proactive conversations with my suppliers now because it might give you some wiggle room, right, in terms of negotiations. And one that we kind of were just talking about, right? Strengthening classification, valuation, and origin governance. We like to say, right, Rainy, mo money, mo problems, right? So, in other words, as we were discussing, with more tariffs is coming more enforcement. It's just an easy, and as you said, there's a big hole to fill, right? All
Yep.
these refunds, they're coming after it. So what should importers be focused on, from a compliance standpoint, if they like, something that they need to focus on in the next 90 days before the year end, knowing what's kind of coming down the pike with enforcement,
Yep.
and these, yeah.
Yeah. I'll address both the supplier agreements and compliance, right? But you gave an excellent example about the landed cost leading into supplier agreements. Traditionally, for all the procurement professionals that are out there, and even on the sales side, right? If you are abroad, there has been and continues to be an existing exit clause in most contracts, and that exit clause is there to protect the buyer in the event, I'll use a very common one, force majeure. In the event of an act of God, right, I can be removed from my commitment to this contract, right? You need to look at putting more exclusion and exit clauses in your contracts. And instead of it just being limited to an act of God, an act of the U.S. government, an act of the U.S. administration, right? Because that could take your situation from being a 25, 50% profit margin to being upside down,
Yep.
erase, if
Yep.
you have to again be forced to that contract. So supplier agreements again need to be looked at. As far as compliance, you know, I don't like to tier the importance of classification over valuation, over origin, when all three, it's like a new Game of Thrones dinosaur now that has, a trifecta, capability, because all three of them can wipe you out, right? But because of the carrot that Customs has laid out with 301, because they started the CSMS and executive order message with, here are harmonized classification numbers that are either included or excluded, right? You have to make sure that you are managing that specifically, that you can defend not only the use of the number that you're declaring, but the use of the numbers that you've traditionally used. Valuation is always going to be important because valuation is linked to the tariffs. Those 10, 12.5%, 25%, 50% is based on the value. So if you incorrectly state the value, that's tariff evasion.
Yep. Yep.
Origin is by country, right? And if you misstate that, not only is an illegal transshipment investigation, it is again, proposed effort of tariff evasion. So all three of them, again, to me, it's a three-headed responsibility that, compliance is not a luxury, right? It is a requirement of demonstration. No longer is it a best practice to have a compliance manual and the appearance of compliance. Appearance is nowhere in these enforcement escalations. This is now a demonstration. And if you don't have it, again, you're still in the majority, because majority of importers don't have that, right?
Right.
We are in a unprecedented time, and there's going to be a time, I'd say 2, 3 years from now, it's going to be entirely different. Most importers are going to have a defensible compliance program, right? Because the government forced us to do it, right? It is
Yep.
not a luxury. But we got to start now, because Customs is not waiting. The DOJ is not waiting. They hope you sit back and put a 5-year plan together, because they would love to collect $1 billion to $5 billion a year over the next 5 years while you go through this roadmap.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's not. It needs to be like a 5-month plan, and you need to get started. You need to
Exactly.
get started now, because they're
Yep,
ready, and yeah, and they want to continue to grow that revenue for sure. So,
absolutely.
and yeah, in addition, obviously, stress tests your sourcing footprint. Everyone talks about moving manufacturing, and sometimes that's the answer, right? Sometimes it's not. But I guess the lesson here, or the takeaway, is that importers have to compare total landed costs. You have to look at transit times, the reliability of your supplier, obviously quality, inventory carrying costs, tariff exposure. So like you can't just look at this as like the cheapest factory, is the one that wins, right? You need to
Right,
really kind of look at
right.
this entire footprint. And lastly, we need to continue to monitor the new Section 301 investigations. Real quick, we're have 1 minute left, and I know if we have some Q&A, but we can answer those after. But just predictions, Rennie, from you for Section 301 before end of summer. Or do you think we see more, or
Yes.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more. I think it is very popular platform, and with the challenges of, again, 25 states challenge what we have today, that has been responded with more tariffs, right? So yeah, I think that is the just because, but the sub-level subject matter, again, I anticipate will continue. I think tariffs are here to stay in one form or another.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you all for spending some time with us today. We know it's summer, so appreciate you guys coming out. And we'll be back next month with some more or another round of tariff tea. So thank you all.
Have a good day.